Die departement van basiese onderwys het 'n nasionale slaagsyfer van 88% vir die matriek van 2025 aangekondig. Tog is daar rede tot kommer. Slegs 34% van matrikulante het wiskunde geneem en hiervan het 36% wiskunde gedryf. Duisende leerlinge wag ook nog om geplaas te word. Om hierdie brandpunte te bespreek, verwelkom ek die minister van basiese onderwys, Siviwe Gwarube. Minister, welcome to the program. So, the record pass rate that last year's matrics had, I mean, you announced that last week. Can that be attributed to your leadership?
Wel, goeienaand Suid-Afrika. Dit is my plesier om saam met julle te gesels op Gesprek. Thank you very much for having me on your show. And I definitely think firstly it's important to congratulate the class of 2025. Remember that the class of 2025 was one of the classes that were affected by COVID-19. They were in grade 8 in 2021. Where they had massive learning losses. So I think that the fact that we're able to catch up on those learning losses has been quite important. But I think you'll realize one of the things that I've indicated, particularly in my time in office, is that while we will always congratulate the class or the matric pass rate, it's important to understand that the matric pass rate in itself is not the only indicator or a quality indicator of the quality in the system. And that we have to look at the education system in its entirety, from 0 to 18, and find out where the quality markers are. It's only but one indicator of the health of your education system. So for me, yes, while we celebrate, it was important to also be quite honest about certain things that we wanted. Things that we want greater participation in maths and science, that we want greater retention, particularly of boy children between grade 10 and grade 12. And that, you know, we were also quite pleased that 66% of bachelor passes came from no fee paying schools. So those things, these are an entire education system's health check and not just one figure.
Okay, but you talk about those health markers and you spoke about maths. Only 34% of last year's matrics had maths as a subject. Why is that?
Look, I mean, I think firstly, we have to as a country understand that we've got to invest in the foundations of learning. Although there's no child who's going to be confident enough to take maths and science only in grade 10 when the foundations of learning have not been strong. And in South Africa, and that is what I've been talking about when I'm saying we need to have a strategic reorientation of the system, where instead of matric being the pinnacle, we need to say actually the most important one is whether or not children are able to read for meaning by the time they turn 10, whether or not grade R's are ready to start grade 1, whether or not we are really building a quality education system from the bottom up. Because once you do that, then you don't have to obsess about whether or not are children taking maths and science in grade 8, 9, and 10. You don't have to obsess about are the numbers good enough, because you would have known that they are able to take on those subjects confidently. That is the biggest problem, that we're unable to get enough children to take on maths and science confidently because they're worried about failure.
Minister, are you saying that 3 decades into democracy that we should basically be starting from scratch in terms of addressing these issues?
I'm saying that we definitely should reorientate the system towards saying the foundations are strongest. Everywhere else you look in the world that has a strong education system, you will realize that one, the 0 to 4s are within the education system, which is what we have in South Africa. Also, that they start school a lot earlier. So the Bella Act makes provision for that. We now have compulsory school from 6 years old and all the way to matric. Our problem in South Africa has been having a fragmented view of what the education system looks like. A matric pass rate is an exit indicator. I'm saying to you, and the challenge to South Africans is that we should value how many children are able to start school and are cognitively developed by age 5 as much as we value how many children are able to exit the system.
What would you say is the biggest single contributor to that not being the case at the moment?
Well, firstly, I think we haven't always incorporated early child development into the education system. Now we have done that. So there's a great opportunity. This is why we've undertaken a mass registration drive to say to ECD owners and practitioners, we want to help you improve so that you can have better infrastructure, that you can have access to the subsidy that we've been given to Treasury, so that children have a nutritious meal a day, so that we can't have a situation where we've got malnutrition and stunting. Secondly, it's important that we have trained practitioners who are rolling out a structured curriculum, even in the early years. Last year, we released an index called the Thrive by 5 Index that found that only 42% of children in South Africa were cognitively developed by the time they turn 5. So that means that they'll get to grade 8, they'll get to grade R, already still behind. Grade 1 behind, because those gaps don't close themselves automatically. They only compound. And then we wonder why children by the age of 10 can't read for meaning, because we let those gaps form much earlier on in life. So I'm saying, yes, we will continue with our efforts of supporting high school students, of supporting grade 10s to 12. But I am unapologetic about the fact that 0 to 6 to 10 is where most of our efforts needs to go.
Okay, but why is it that in a province like Gauteng, the one we're in at the moment, why is it that so many children have not been placed at a school and the school year started?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think and I want to be deeply empathetic when I'm talking about this issue, because it's one that's contributing a lot of anxiety to parents. A lot of parents are worried about will their children find school? Where will they find school? So I want to first make the promise that we are constitutionally obligated to make sure that every single child is placed. And yes, of course, provinces like the Western Cape and Gauteng particularly struggle with placements because, of course, parents move to areas where there's economic opportunities, and sometimes these provinces get late applications. But also, I must also indicate that the system is growing at a pace that the fiscal envelope is unable to keep up.
It's a money issue.
It is a money issue. So on one end, what parents can say, but we haven't been communicating with us. The online system is not working, which is some of the things, the feedback that I'm getting, which is on the one issue. But it's also about the fact that we are having situations where schools have had to have mobile classrooms attached to it, where we're adding classrooms in order for us to accommodate the number of learners. So our system is growing, but the fiscal envelope has been consistently shrinking. And this, for me, is the question and the challenge for the South African government as a whole, and not just education. Are we prepared to invest and put our money where our mouth is?
But what about consequence management? I mean, we have a situation, you talk about the Western Cape and Gauteng. Schools are being built in the Western Cape, doesn't seem to be the case in Gauteng. Is there consequence management for provincial leadership?
Look, I mean, first, it's important to understand, obviously, that these are concurrent functions. So the person who would hold an MEC to account would obviously be the Premier.
But could you not hold the Premier accountable?
No, I would not be able to hold the Premier accountable, but definitely in our meetings, our Council of Education Ministers, these things we do ask them. For instance, at the end of last year, we asked very difficult questions. Are we ready for grade R? How many places are you missing? Are you ready for admissions? Because it was this very thing that we wanted to avoid. We wanted to close off the year knowing, are the textbooks going to be delivered on time? These things are all important. And a system as big as ours needs people to be a lot more organized. And that's why I'm consistently on the cases of MECs to say, deliver textbooks the year before. Make sure that whatever remedial or additional classrooms you need to build, you build the year before. Already you've got that data coming in on the application. So yes, it's a mixture of both, I think, a financial issue, but also perhaps refining our systems and also making sure that we're a little bit more responsive and a lot more empathetic to parents who are completely debilitated by anxiety of not getting placements for their children.
You've been in this position now for 18 months. How does it make you feel when you visit schools where the infrastructure is completely lacking, or in situations where some schools still have pit toilets?
Look, I mean, I think, and I was quite clear about the fact that infrastructure backlogs is something that's probably going to be with us for a while. But what we must do and be unapologetic about is saying we have to clear the backlog of pit toilets that was identified in 2018. And yes, infrastructure will forever be a moving target because we will consistently do these audits and we will find more and more things that are wrong. But that's why provinces need to move to a point where on the one side, they've got one part of their budget is towards actually building schools and building new infrastructure, and the other side is actually dedicated to maintaining schools. Because one of the things that we find is that I will go to Limpopo and they will say, look, we eradicated these pit toilets, but then they stopped working. And then we created another one. So this is why it's important that provinces are focusing on a lot more on maintenance as well, because it doesn't help that you build these state-of-the-art schools, but they're poorly maintained.
So you started off the show by greeting myself and the viewers in Afrikaans, for our Afrikaans viewers who have children in Afrikaans schools. What's your message to them if they are perhaps concerned about the Bella Bill and the possible phasing out of Afrikaans?
Look, I think it's very important to understand that there's one, we are very much confident about mother tongue-based bilingual education. In South Africa, the science backs it up. It indicates that children who are taught in the language of their home, of their birth, perform far better than children who are not. And so, in fact, part of the literacy crisis with particularly poor black children is the fact that they are not taught in the language of their home by the time they get to grade 4. And then that changes almost immediately. And you can literally see the stats of children failing. And there should be no child who's failing grade 4. So the use of mother tongue-based bilingual education is very important. It literally contributes to the literacy and the numeracy crisis that we're trying to fix. So I think parents should not be anxious about the phasing out of mother tongue education in South Africa. We are realizing that our languages are not a barrier, but they are actually a massive asset in getting our children to being a lot more fluent, a lot more confident in literacy and numeracy.
Minister Gwarube, thank you so much.
Thank you.